Salutations, Nemo here. I wanted to talk about what I think would be a cool new path, or I don't know what you call them, specialty, the things you get at third level that I think would go great for sorcerers and warlocks, and I'm going to put wizard in the title because the witch comes from the wizard subclass in 4th edition from Heroes of the Feywild. I've been watching a lot of D&D related YouTube videos lately, and I wanted to, talk about some stuff that I think would be cool. Heroes of the Feywild was a book that came out in the later part of the life of 4th edition, but it's one of my favorite supplemental books. It adds pixies as a race, which is my favorite race that this book adds. It also adds hamadryads and satyrs, and it also has subclasses for like druid, bard, barbarian, and then of course the wizard. There might be one more. And it also adds some new themes, and like themes were a sort of secondary background thing that you could add to your character. And you know how warlocks can take I think it's called the Pact of the Blade, where you can manifest a weapon in your hand out of nowhere? Well, literally anyone could do that in 4th edition if they took the theme and put it on their character from this book. It was called the Unseelie Agent theme. And you could like create a shadow rot weapon that was automatically +1, and it would automatically level up its enhancement bonus every few levels or so. And it's a pretty good book in my opinion. Also drinking some tea here. So the witch is an odd class. It's a wizard subclass, but it's like a warlock because of how it gets its powers, and then it also has some elements of like clerics or druids in there in their spell selection. So I'm going to read the lore of the witch from the book, and then you'll understand what I mean by that. Part religion, part ritual, and all mystery, witchcraft is an ancient practice that came about in an age before arcane magic was studied, institutionalized, and etched in writing, when monstrous titans ruled over creation and the secret of making fire was yet undiscovered. In this chaotic dark age, the gods had little influence on the Titans' world. Instead of seeking their aid, the primitive peoples called out to the night for protection and power, and a voice from the darkness answered. Those who accepted its arcane gifts became the first witches, and they wielded such power as only immortals had known, seen by some jealous gods as an affront that they have never forgiven. Witches gain their power from a patron. See, that's where the warlock bit comes in. From a patron who instructs them by way of a mystical familiar that comes and goes as it pleases, unbound by the strictures of the material world. Basically, in game mechanics, you can summon or disperse your familiar, so it's not present in battles, it can't be attacked or whatever. The most prevalent patron among witches, the original voice from the darkness, is the moon goddess Sehanine, referred to by witches simply as the goddess. Other entities have since seen the advantage of imbuing mortals with power, and so your patron might be an archfey, a god, an angel, a primordial, a demon lord, a devil, or another legendary being that believes it can benefit by imbuing you with a gift of arcane prowess. It might prefer to remain anonymous. The circumstances by which you obtained your gift can very widely. Some witches seek out the gift in order to fulfill a personal desire or vendetta, while others were brought up in a coven. Some receive their power after making a pact with the devil, as a warlock might do, and others have bestowed it upon them by a fairy godparent or a witch queen. Though witches are common among the Fey races in the Feywild, as a witch in the natural world, you must be mindful of whom you trust. In the world, common folk fear your kind. Envious wizards refuse to acknowledge you as a peer and would see your wondrous power vanish from the world, while clerics of jealous gods decree you an unholy menace, sending witch hunters to track you down and destroy you. So you can see they blatantly say, like, you get this through a patron that sends a familiar to you, and you might not even know who your patron is, or that you even have one, basically. One of the class features is, of course, Witch's Familiar. If you'll excuse me reading a little bit more, I'll read that little section as well. Unlike other wizards, a witch receives the gift of arcane power from a patron, such as blah blah blah, or another powerful being. The witch might not even be aware of the patron's true identity or its reasons for bestowing power, but such entities always have their reasons, which become clear in time, for good or ill. A witch's familiar takes the shape of a tiny creature, usually a natural fey beast, such as a cat, a serpent, or a raven, and acts as an intermediary between the witch and the patron of the witch's power. Bound to the witch's soul, this familiar instructs the witch in the use of supernatural powers. Your familiar can have as active a role as you like. Familiars have a distinct personality and a unique relationship with the witches they instruct. Your familiar might provide hints and lore, or it might be a subtle presence in the background that appear and disappear without a sound, if you prefer to downplay its role in your story. Now that you've suffered through hearing me read, let's talk about the mechanical things that a witch does. So I mentioned, I think, clerics and druids, how they get their spell selection, in that, you can, at the beginning of a day, excuse me there, my throat decided to have something stuck in it for a second. You have access to every single spell on your spell list, whereas sorcerers and warlocks and wizards, you have to say, I know this selection of spells and nothing else, and then you gain more spells as you level. Instead, the witch has access to all the spells at the beginning, sort of. You have to choose your spell selection, sort of the same way a wizard does, or a cleric, or whatever, where X spells prepared that day. Where the witch shines is that, like I said, unlike the wizard who only knows X number of spells, but can, if you know enough spells, you can completely replace them each day. The witch knows every spell, but it can replace one of them each day. You have to take a long rest in between that. But it can do from the entire selection of wizard powers. So it's sort of a combination between the two ways of having your spell selection. So if you wanted to spend a week or two just chillaxing and replacing one spell you have prepared per day, you could just completely do that. Or you could be like, well, I only need to change this one, or whatever. Just spend a couple days, replace the two that you really need to. I think instead of a wizard path, because wizards already, they can regain spell slots for spell castings per day, more than sorcerers and in many ways, or many times, more than warlocks, depending on how many short rests in a day that you get. And then they also know more spells, but they just have to prepare them. But wizards they can prepare a number of spells. I think it was 1 plus their wizard level, if I remember correctly. No, it's actually your intelligence modifier plus your wizard level, minimum of 1 spell. So that's even more. Like, at first level, a lot of wizards will be able to prepare 4 spells. Sorcerers know 2 spells. Basically, wizards, from what I've heard, like Nerdarchy and Web DM and some others say, is wizards are basically like the best option for the most part as far as spell castings and spells known and stuff like that. So I would apply this to this. That's why I would apply this to the Sorcerer and the Warlock. And what I would do for the path is keep that, like, you can replace 1 spell per day, and then also maybe give at least 1 more spell known per day, and then increase that as you level in that specialization of being a witch, so that you can maybe replace 2 spells per day, and you get, an extra 2 spells known. Because personally, when I first saw the Warlock, I was like, okay, you can know, like, 2 first level spells at the level that I was at in my campaign. And then there's these patron spells that I thought automatically just added to your spells known that you could cast, but that's not true. You just have those spells added to your spell list that you can choose to learn. So they're really, really super gimped, both in the number of spells that they can cast in a given battle, and just the number of spells that they know. So you almost have to completely specialize in battle or roleplay spells, which is something that I don't particularly like. And then, as part of being a witch, you also got a daily power. For those of you who don't know or don't remember, or maybe you do, in 4th edition you had at-will powers, and those would usually be like your cantrips in 5th edition. But also fighters got a bunch of at-will powers so that they weren't as boring, because you would not just, attack, now I attack next round, and next round, I attack again. It was, I attempt to attack, and then also, like, you could, and also, if I hit, I deal my strength modifier damage to the enemy next to it. But there was at-will, encounter, and daily powers, and encounter powers you had to take a short rest, which was much shorter in 4th edition than 5th, because it was like 5 or 10 minutes for a short rest in 4th compared to 5th, which is a long rest. So anyways, you get the Augury spell. It's a divination spell, and you can have like a vague notion of the future. You can ask it whether it's like, this specific course of action will generally have a positive or negative outcome. You can look up the spell. It's in 5th edition. I think it's a 2nd or 3rd level wizard spell, if I remember correctly. I don't really remember. But it's pretty good. That's something that you always get. You can always cast it once per day. I think that would be like an extra spell slot that you could get for 5th edition. And then witches also chose between 2 covens. The Dark Moon, aka New Moon, or the Full Moon Coven. The Dark Moon Coven, they gain training in Intimidate, and then later, in a later level, They also gained a +2 bonus to intimidate checks and stealth checks. And they also got the Dread Presence power, which that was an encounter power, so once per short rest. It did D10 necrotic damage, and the target is slowed if it hit. Even if it didn't hit, it created a zone. The power or the spell is a blast 5, so think basically a bigger Burning Hands, but instead of, Burning Hands would be blast 3, this is blast 5. So a 5x5 zone, it creates a zone that lasts until the end of your next turn. Any enemy that ends its turn in the zone takes necrotic damage equal to your wisdom modifier. Special, all damage from this attack and its effects ignores 5 points of necrotic resistance. So your low-level undead, which usually had necrotic resistance, if I remember, in 4th edition, they would just not get that, essentially. And then the Full Moon Coven was more of your goody two-shoes type of thing, where they gained training and heal, and then later they got a +2 to heal checks and diplomacy checks. And then they got the Glorious Presence power, which is also an encounter power, and it's burst 2, which means 2 squares in every direction out from you, which is, 10 feet from you. And it dealt 2d6 Radiant, which is pretty special because usually Radiant is the purview of clerics and paladins, or, other divine casters, so that's pretty good if that's what you want to do. And then it also pushes the target a number of squares up to your wisdom modifier. And the effect that happens whether you hit anyone or not is you and each ally in the burst gain temporary hit points equal to your wisdom modifier. So you have a more dark evil witch kind of thing, or not necessarily evil, but I'm sure more evil things would gravitate to the Dark Moon Coven, whereas the Full Moon Coven, healing and diplomacy and radiant damage, that sort of thing. And it adds a bunch of daily and encounter powers to the wizard class. They're very thematic. Like the level 5 daily power, Foe to Frog. Hit, the target turns into a tiny beast of your choosing, save ends. In 4th edition, you would just roll a 20-sided die, and if you got a 10 or higher, you automatically, you saved the saving throw, whereas 1 through 9 you failed. And on a miss, the target changes into a tiny beast of your choosing until the end of its next turn. So either way, at 5th level you could take this and it would be like a frog. And the effect is, as a tiny beast, the target is dazed, which means it only got 1 action. And the only actions it can take are to move its speed or shift. In 4th, shifting was movement without provoking an opportunity attack, but the standard shift was equivalent to the previous edition's 5-foot step, where you used your entire movement to move 1 square, or aka 5 feet, but don't provoke opportunity attacks. If it takes damage from any source, this effect ends. So essentially, you could either eliminate a foe for 1 round if you didn't hit it, or you could potentially eliminate it until you were ready to deal with it if it got really unlucky on its saving throws. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. So I don't know how I would necessarily balance that. Like I said, this isn't something that I've overly thought out as far as they should get this or that versus whatever the sorcerers. But there is one thing that I think, before I started recording, I was thinking something to add incentive to the witch, because just having extra spells prepared, or like, maybe giving one extra slot every handful of levels that you can cast per day, and being able to swap out one spell for any other spell per day is maybe add some meta magic feats, and then have it be something like you can do it a number times of day equal to your ability modifier plus 1, and then every handful of levels add one more. And so it would be like a little bit equivalent to the sorcerer's ability to do that, but then not have it based on sorcery points, just like you can do any meta magic once using one of these points. But also I would limit the number of meta magics. Like, I would not allow Twinned Spell or Careful Spell. I think you should automatically get Heightened Spell, because which is turning people into like frogs or whatever. When you cast a spell that forces a creature to make a saving throw to resist its effects, you can spend 3 sorcery points to give one target of the spell disadvantage on its first saving throw made against the spell. So you basically, when you're trying to turn someone into a frog, the stereotypical witch thing, you could be like, well, I'm so good at this, you can't resist me. I think Extended Spell would be good. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I would balance that with the Sorcerer. Like I said, I do think Sorcerers should have the Witch subclass, and then how the meta magics from the Witch class that I want would interact with the Sorcerer points. I don't know how to do that, but maybe there could be like 2 different things instead of just saying this one this one path can be for sorcerers or warlocks. You can do like Sorcerer Witch and then Warlock Witch, and have 2 mildly different power sets. Like the Warlock Witch would gain some meta magics, and maybe the Sorcerer would be able to have, I don't know, 1 extra spellcasting per day. More spellcasting per short rest would be pretty powerful for a Warlock. I don't know if that would be something. Okay, I realize I'm rambling, and I'm going to have to cut out like a bunch of stuff. Alright, so at this point I am just more rambling than getting a coherent thought out. So I would love to know what other people think of this idea, and if you liked this video, click the like button. Feel free to share it. I would appreciate that. And have fun gaming. Think about the idea. I really, it would add more flavor to 5th edition, different things you could do. Oh, an honorable mention of the Witch is that in 4th edition, what is a first level spell in 5th edition, Witch Bolt. In 4th, it was an at-will power. It was range 5, so 25 feet, shorter than in 5th by 5 feet. 1 creature on a hit, D10 plus intelligence modifier lightning damage, and then every turn after that, just use your standard action to reroll the damage and deal it to the target. But if the target is out of range, you can't sustain the power. So think about that. Every turn, every single turn, you can do this. The daily power, 1st level, Charm of Forbiddance. On a hit, 3d8 plus int mod psychic damage, range 20, and the effect, whether or not it hits, the target takes psychic damage equal to 2 plus your wisdom modifier whenever it hits or misses you or one of your allies, save ends. That's some shit, isn't it? Level 6 daily utility power. Immediate reaction, trigger you are damaged by an attack. Effect, you are removed from play until the start of your next turn. The space you vacate becomes a zone that is heavily obscured and lasts until the end of the encounter. At the start of your next turn, you reappear in a square of your choice up to 5 squares from the zone. So basically, if you get hit and you're like, well, I don't want to get hit anymore, you can just be like, nope, I'm not here. You can't. I'm not there. Nope, not. No one can hit me now. And then, once it's your turn again, you reappear. You can only do it once per day, but it's pretty good. Another level 6 wizard utility, range 5. It's only one target, but you or one ally, you remove one effect from the target that a save can end. Which is pretty good if someone happens to be set on fire or charmed or mentally taken over, or whatever various things that are bad that could happen to someone. And just be like, no, I free you from this. Oh look, later at level 13 you get a improved version of Dread Presence or Glorious Presence. I think anyone can take them, though it's not actually tied to either path. So you can start out as one, and then at level 13, many sessions later, you can get an improved version. They do more damage, or heal more damage and ignore more. And the improved Dread Presence ignores more of the necrotic resistance. Holy shit. Level 15 daily power. Charm of the Dark Dream. Range 5 versus one creature. It's intelligence versus will, so in 5th edition it would be like a will saving throw. Or whatever. Wisdom saving throw? 2d6 plus intelligence modifier psychic damage. And the target is dominated. Save ends. Until the domination ends, you are removed from play. You can end the domination at the start of your turn. When you return to play, you appear in an unoccupied space within 5 squares of the target. That is so good. You basically just possess an enemy, and then nothing can hit your actual body until the domination ends, or until you choose to end the domination. Hex of Woe, also level 15. 4d10 plus intelligence modifier, cold and necrotic damage. Miss half damage. And the effect that happens, whether you hit or not, target gains vulnerable 5 to all damage, save ends. So it takes 5 more damage from every single attack until it can roll a saving throw. That is so good. Oh, and I should note that levels in 4th edition go up to 30, not 20. Like in 3rd, I think max was 40. Then in 4th edition, it's 30. And now in 5th edition, it's 20. Which I think is kind of lame. But I suppose that's... Everything in 5th edition is sort of clamped down, and the variance doesn't go quite as wide, like, your proficiency bonus and the enhancement bonuses on weapons. There's not as much magic. You don't have feats unless the DM is allowing that variant option. Overall, that's one of the things I really dislike about 5th. Choking Shadow is pretty good. You conjure a shadow next to an enemy, and then it's an encounter power, and then it makes an attack that if it hits, it's 2d10 plus intelligence modifier, cold and necrotic damage, and the target is immobilized until the end of your next turn. Miss half damage and the target is slowed until the end of your next turn. And you cannot sustain the shadow. But if it does hit, you can sustain it as a standard action, and it continues to attack every round. That's pretty good. Level 19, Mass Transformation. It's like the level 5 spell, but in a 5x5 area within 20 squares, so 100 feet. Preserving Sleep. Immediate Interrupt. Range 20. Trigger, you or an ally within 20 squares of you dies. Target the triggering character. Effect. The target does not die. All harmful effects end on him or her, and the target's hit points reset to 0. The target falls into a stasis that resembles sleep. In this state, the target does not age, although he or she can be killed, and the target is immune to hunger, thirst, poison, disease, and suffocation. This stasis lasts until the target is healed. I mean, it's level 22. You're frickin'... that's the epic tier. But yeah, that's pretty nice. You know, once per day. So you can just be like, nope, my ally doesn't die. You thought he did. But alas, too bad for you, DM. And or monster. Depending on whether you're doing that in or out of character. At level 27, you get a Supreme Dread Presence or Glorious Presence. Again, I don't think those are actually mechanically tied